Well, thank you so much. Boy, I tell you, let's give the panelists for what they've already done a big hand, you know? I had a discussion with with Brian after he left about Dubai, and we both come to the conclusion that the 5 little guys out of the projects in Detroit 30 years ago came out with a song that kind of describes the Dubai situation. What was that song called? Beauty is only skin deep. So I saw the beauty, but it was only skin deep when you saw the effects on the workers and you saw the effect on the inside of the construction, so that everything that looked good might not necessarily be good. So as long as we put safety first and people first, that goes well ahead of beauty when it comes to architecture and construction. So thanks, Brian, for getting me straight, you know. Hey, guys, let's talk, and let's try to answer some of the questions that these guys have put forth in regards to your presentations. And tell you what we're going to do now. Everybody will have 3 minutes to answer your questions. There might be an instance where there's a follow-up response that one might want to give. Now, it's always somebody that'll give a 10-minute answer. Now, what you don't know is that right under this building is a river, right? The Clinton River runs right under this building, and one of the guys up here has a latch. So if you don't want to end up in the Clinton River, you'll give some very succinct answers. And these guys, some of you, they're like old bulldogs. They can smell that whiskey out there. And they want to take a drink. I surely want to take one. So let's get to some of the questions. Anthony.
Yes.
Talk about your future competition in the entertainment business. How will home VRs, video streaming, and other technologies impact you in the distant future?
Well, I think it's never been more competitive for our industry. There's a wonderful study that was recently done by Ernst & Young that shows folks that stream the most content at home happen to be the folks that visit the theaters the most. So I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think there's big budget films and those Marvel films that folks want to see, as I showed earlier, on the biggest screen possible and have the best experience possible. And I don't think you can get that at home. But that doesn't mean art film and middle market films aren't viewed more frequently at home versus in theater. But it isn't a zero-sum game. I think both win equally, and this past week might be proof of that, with Netflix agreeing to exclusive theatrical window for their big budget pictures before they go on streaming.
Great, thank you so much. And Gabe, in regards to the economy, one question says, the data indicates that economic growth and population growth operate nearly in union. Is there research available that offer methods for course correction? How do we counteract what seems to be the inevitable?
Yeah, it's a really important question. As Brian pointed out, demographics are a little bit like a tanker or an aircraft carrier. It takes a long time to turn the ship around. And so if you don't like the trends, the best time to begin was 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. But there are some policy levers. The first thing to say is a strong labor market will draw workers to Michigan and younger people to Michigan. And obviously we've had the opposite experience where, for about 15 years or so, we had a weak labor market and we were losing people. One trend that we can't control is the weather. And there was some talk about the climate haven. Basically, since air conditioning became economically feasible, the U.S. population has been moving south. It's been moving west, and that's it's just an ongoing trend. It's slow, but one of the big policy levers where potentially we can move the needle relatively fast is immigration and international immigration. Michigan relies on people moving here from abroad as a really important source of strength and growth, and that's one that really is amenable to policy. So I think that's one avenue I always point towards as a potential source of growth.
Great, thank you so much. Any feedback from you guys? You comfortable? Great. Healthcare, Peter. One question is, our company's health insurance costs are going up 20% this year. Are healthcare costs going up that much in reality? Are there other areas where costs are decreasing?
So it's fair to say we've seen incredible inflation in just traditional healthcare over the last 3 years with the pandemic. And as I said when I was speaking, the Great Resignation has depleted our nursing staff and some of our most capable technical folks. So nursing's huge, but radiology techs and other things like that, we're paying 400% or 500% of their salaries just to staff our units. And at that, we can't find enough labor to open up all of our capacity. So we're turning away demand because we don't have enough labor. So we're seeing incredible inflation, and unfortunately for me in healthcare, and maybe good for all of you, we just can't arbitrarily raise our rates. We can raise our prices, but we still get paid what the insurance companies are going to pay. Medicare does not give us any more money. So the only levers we generally have are through commercial insurance. So we're actually working closely in our negotiations to try to get better reimbursement to cover the costs that we're seeing. And hospitals and healthcare in general have very low margins. A good year is 2 or 3%. So, and think about the 8 or 9% inflation we've seen across the economy in general. I'm sure it's higher in healthcare. That depletes your bottom line so quickly. So, yes, we're seeing incredible inflation. We're compelled to, try to manage through that as best we can. I pointed to a number of things in my presentation that talked about how to bend the curve, how to decrease demand, how to push things to an outpatient setting, how to do things more virtually that we don't keep going back to and taxing this workforce and infrastructure that we've got. Those things are going to become incredibly more significant as we go forward. It's, we've had these capabilities for an awful long time to do many of these things virtually and manage health across the spectrum. We haven't had the compelling burning platform in society to do that. And now when you're seeing 20% increases in your insurance, in the premiums that you're having to pay as an employer, you're going to start looking long and hard at what I can do as an employer to drive that cost down. Am I going to contract with a narrow network? And some of my employees won't be too happy. Am I going to pass the cost on to my employees? They're not going to like that either. But we're going to have to make some decisions about how we treat patients, how we become more economical in the process. To this point, nobody has ever thought that healthcare is anything that people are going to price shop for. And I think that's changing. That's my opinion. I think it's going to change. I think you can get an MRI anywhere. When you start talking about surgery, you might think twice. But folks are, Walmart contracts with the Cleveland Clinic, I think, and they send all their heart surgery there. So they found it cheaper to contract and fly their employees to the Cleveland Clinic to get their treatment than it is to try to go out in any hospital in the country to take care of their patients. So there's a lot of tough decisions in front of us, but yeah, the inflation's incredible.
Kimberly?
Yes.
You talked a lot about teaching and teaching profession. What's your opinion about what the future is for the role of teachers?
I think the role of teachers will remain as big as they've ever been. I think we talked a lot about spaces and architecture, and I think that although we've better embraced online learning, because of the pandemic, and it's a convenient way for a lot of adult learners, a lot of learners who have a lot of life to actually go back to school or to actually complete their bachelor's degree. I think the role of the teacher is more pivotal because of that relationship. I think we still are very social people. I think that interaction, even in the classroom with classmates, will continue to be important. But I think when students make a decision to come to a campus, to engage live with an instructor, they're gonna expect a lot. They're gonna expect an engaging experience because again, I wouldn't compare teachers to YouTube, but knowledge is a lot more accessible than it's ever been. But again, that interaction with an instructor and great teachers that we've all had and experienced, I think that's never gonna change. It's just gonna look different in how it might be delivered.
Well, a follow-up to that question is, where are the men in elementary and junior high school? And what impact does that have on the profession?
I think it has a big impact. I think it has a big impact. When we look now at the largest decline in enrollment in college, especially this past fall, it's with male students. And the area where we don't see a lot of male instructors is in elementary school and in middle schools. And I think there's something to be said about who you see and how that impacts your love of learning. And there's a lot of programs that are being hosted at many colleges now to promote more males going into the classroom. And I think if we can get them more in those elementary school years, I do think it will make a big difference. Our biggest competitor right now for our male students is $21 an hour. So especially at a community college, the universities and colleges are seeing it too. If a student's on the borderline about, do I want to go to college or not, it's not a hard decision when you can go make $21 an hour, delivering pizza and doing a whole bunch of other things, and so we need to help people understand early in life that a love of learning is important. And a lot of us like to have interventions in high school. It's kind of too late. That intervention needs to take place in elementary and middle schools.
Right. Thank you, Kim. Dan, do you see architecture and engineering becoming more integrated in the future? And if so, what does that look like 10 plus years from now?
Definitely, and I think the integration needs to be across architecture, engineering, and construction. It can't be just architecture, engineering. I think if Brian and I had our way, probably when we were asked to speak, we probably would have been speaking on a stage at the same time instead of thinking that okay, we have architecture, engineering, and then you give it to the contractor. No, the contractor and architectural engineering should be simultaneously working together, and that may be the same person doing all three. It may be three different people doing it. I mean, three different firms. When I say people, I don't mean individuals. But I think that's essential because think about the product we produce. Someone can walk into a store and buy a car, buy a phone, and buy these things. Someone comes to us and say, okay, we're going to spend some time designing, then we're going to do some engineering, and then we're going to start construction. So maybe 18 months to 2 years, we're going to have what you want. They're ready to have it now. And then bigger buildings, we know even more. That is important to integrate better and work together better, and that will help that. But then also some of the things that Brian was showing will also help that process a lot.
Thank you very much. Brian, while I have you, I have another question to discuss the role of data analytics and big data on the future of the industries presented today.
To myself, yes. Okay.
No, I'm sorry. That's Brian.
Yes.
I thought you got the answer.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you were looking over, I said, okay. I want Brian to handle that one.
You got to be prepared.
I mean, I think we're data and analytics. I mean, there are many different ways that you could apply data and analytics to the future of the industry, right? And I do think they become increasingly important because there's going to be so many pressures on contractors' margins, right? Labor's going to get more expensive. Regulatory compliance is going to get more expensive. Land acquisitions get more expensive. The materials we've got to purchase as an industry get more expensive, especially as they get sort of greener and more environmentally friendly. So, firms are going to be eager to find ways to become as efficient as possible, right? Not just in how they build things by using lean, but also in what are the data they can take that they can use to find out ways to sort of All right, so I'm going to digress for a second, but I swear it's relevant. I'm a big fan of professional biking, which makes me sort of a pariah in my office because everyone else likes baseball. But there's a team called Sky that they used to talk about that they would win on the margins by finding ways to be incrementally better at every little element of bike racing. It's going to be the same thing for the construction industry. How can you use data to become incrementally more efficient on the job site? Whether it's with wearables tracking where sort of movement of employees on a job site, so that you can say, wait, we're keeping all the tools in the wrong spot, or we're keeping all the sort of supplies they need, 50 paces away when it should be 20 paces away. Same thing, we can look at health and safety performance and use data to really make a lot more sort of, as opposed to making a gut instinct about improving safety, data can be to drive kind of improvements in the health and safety performance of your teams. And then again, if you look at, especially as the industry goes to electrifies, all the equipment becomes electrified. How can you be more efficient in terms of the use of your electric equipment and mitigating the amount of time, a tool has got to be recharged or equipment's got to be recharged. So, I mean, the short answer is data it's not everything, but it's an enormous part of what goes into the future success of the industry.
Let me ask you guys a question. Do you see the line between public and private construction changing or merging in the future? Anybody?
I mean, I talked about this. Yes, I mean, I think the lines get blurred. What's traditionally public now becomes public and private, and what's traditionally private now, you see a lot more incursion of the public sector. And that's not just in regulation, that's in funding, that's in tax abatements. And again, I keep harping on I'll just say Inflation Reduction Act, but that's a significant legislative milestone in that for the first time ever, the federal government is using the tax code to drive labor regulations, right? So they're using the IRS to, in terms of the tax credits that are available for firms that want to take advantage of it. To do that, you've got to comply with a series of labor provisions in terms of percentage of your workforce that has come out of a registered apprenticeship program, for example. That's new. And guess what? That's not going to go away. So yes, the public sector gets more involved, not just in funding and building projects that were traditionally private sector, but they get more involved in setting work rules on projects that the federal government may not, or any public sector may not have any dollars in because of tax credits or the tax structure. So yes, the line gets blurrier.
Yeah.
So how do you guys see natural disasters affecting your industry, and how much reaction should we bring to change?
That's sort of part of what's underneath. If many of the news programs that I've been researching, as I started pulling this together, we've been talking a lot about this at the school and with other deans at other schools, particularly in the South and California and so on, where they were having to begin to think about, wow, people after a hurricane they're moving away, but they're not coming back. And not just the last hurricanes we get, but even just in a period of time over a few years. And so where are they going? What are they doing? Some are moving just to adjacent states, or some are moving further away. But from the standpoint of how we build, as I was saying briefly in the talk, is say, do we as architecture, construction, and engineering say it's okay to build anywhere? We might have to begin to say this isn't the right place to build. And together, if the three of us together support that can change how things work. So then we provide more density. It's not that we build less, it's that we're building more in specific places where more density could occur and things like that.
Yeah. In our industry, obviously, with hospitals and healthcare, we generally don't evacuate when there's a bad prediction coming. So, fortunately, we're in 22 states. Most of them are fine, Midwest or isolated, but we have a hospital in Fort Lauderdale, and we have a hospital in Fresno, California, near the fault line. So clearly we've got different things in different markets. So earthquakes are harder to predict, but I kind of watch our team down there. It's like, oh, we got a hurricane coming. It's like, a hurricane's coming. Hey, we got this. Well, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to handle it. So, to the extent we can't close. Right. And There were a couple of hospitals in this last hurricane that were flooded and they had to move all their patients out. So clearly they try to get back open again as soon as possible, but we're a part of the natural disaster infrastructure, so we've got to be there.
Gabe, you talked about the number of young people leaving the state. What initiatives can be put forth to change that trend?
Yeah, it's an important question. I think the first thing to say is to make sure the local labor market has jobs for students when they finish school and when they get their certificates. I think that was the most important driver of our losing young people over the start of the millennium and in the single state recession. Interstate migration is falling in the United States. People more and more stick around where they grew up. So we've got the home team advantage in terms of keeping our young people, but you've got to have a job out there for them. So I think trying to be farsighted about that is really important. I think an advantage we have in Michigan is we do have a great university system, and I'm not just talking my book here, but I do think that helps. Obviously there's the placemaking, there's making sure that there are communities that people are excited to live in. I think Michigan has a lot to offer in terms of quality of life, in terms of natural beauty. We have a lot of waterfront. I think embracing our waterfront in Michigan is an ongoing process. We know in Detroit, they've been voted the most beautiful waterfront. I think 2 years in a row now. Yeah. So I think that's fantastic. I've done some work on the impacts of Great Lakes restoration and improving the waterfront. It does drive economic activity here. So I think that it's a combination of things. I don't expect to go back to where we were, at the start of the millennium, where we were really just hemorrhaging our young people. Maybe that's too dramatic to say, but we can't be complacent. We've got to fight. And make sure that the opportunities are there. Another thing, that does enter into people's calculations is cost of living. And there we do have, we have an advantage. But one thing being in Ann Arbor, I think there are, people are sometimes skeptical about building more. And I guess I'm probably preaching to the choir, but having that attitude that building houses for people to live in is a good thing. Mm-hmm. Not to get too polemical. But to say, we want people here, I think just embracing that attitude is really important. So I think, there are things we can do. I think that the cost of living should help us. I think remote work, it's really tough to tell how that's going to affect things in the long run. But just, embracing the strengths that we have, I think, really can make a difference. So.
Thank you.
Tom, can I add to that real quick? Sure. As you drill down of loss, I worked in 2011, 2012, and 13 on the Detroit Works project, which became Detroit Future City, which was the master plan for, the development strategy for the city of Detroit. And one of the things we looked at with the brain drain that we were hearing about is very true. So, Gabe, is very true. But when we looked at the statistics of other cities, now drilling down to the Detroit area, of how many people leave, when they're 18, 19, 20, and so on, the numbers were right on par with other places around the country. It's that we couldn't bring them back, which relates to jobs, quality of life, where, that was the difference is once they left, you want them some to go and they come back with new ideas, new cultural understandings that they found, but we weren't doing that. They were leaving New York, but then they were coming back to, at least maybe not to Manhattan, but they were coming back to another area, to the area. That's what we need to be able to draw them back, and that long view helps do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let me do a quick round robin, and I want to get out of 2020s and 2030s and 2040s. I want to go to 2050s. All right, and ask you the question: what do you think will be the greatest technological and innovative change in your business? I want to start with culture and entertainment. Anthony, take us to 2052, and what do you see?
Someone showed the Tesla suit earlier, and I think you can envision a scenario of you're sitting in a room, a theater or an auditorium, and when we talk about fully immersive, it's truly fully immersive. It's touch, feel, scent, smell, wind. It's there are theater concepts out there now. When it rains in the film, it will rain in the auditorium. We've looked at them. I don't think folks are excited about getting wet when they go to the movies, but those concepts are out there, and I think it's truly a fully immersive experience, and all your senses are completely occupied by what's on the screen and around you. I think that is probably most likely, and VR plays into that heavily at some point as well.
Great. And Gabriel, when you think about economics, you think about technological change, innovation, and people's expectations for the future. What do you think those three variables are for 2052?
Yeah, and I might still be working in 2052. There's that chance. So, somebody might come back and hold me accountable. So I want to choose my words. But I think there are a few different things. And I'm not a technologist, so in that sense, I'm going outside of my expertise. But something we're seeing now is machine learning and artificial intelligence is absolutely incredible, and people use it in economics. The big data revolution has really started transforming the field. It's incredible. You can get text written for you by AI that you would have no idea was not written by a person. And I think that a lot of kind of the lower value tasks that we do today are going to get eaten up. And traditionally automation and technological progress, it's labor saving. It has tended to be in the past in more blue collar industries where things that are routine that you can automate. It's coming for white collar work. I think that's, and look, in some ways it will add value, it will make it easier for people to add value, but the days when, automation and machines, that, competing with a machine is not for, it's not for white collar professionals, it's not for, economists. I think, those days are numbered. People are gonna have to think hard about what is the value I'm adding when a machine can write an essay that's, faster, cheaper than I can do. It's a wild world we're gonna be living in, so.
Great. And Peter, millions, billions of dollars are given to research. And when you add all those billions out over the next 30 years, will we have cancer?
That's a great question. So first off, I got to say, I feel like I'm on in between two ferns. So, as far as, what's going to be cured, I think, we've made incredible strides with cancer in the last 25 years. It's becoming, many cancers, a chronic disease. And what we're finding now, even the new mRNA base of the COVID vaccines, that is now a delivery vehicle for flu vaccines. We can anticipate, and this is a little way out of my expert zone, but kind of I'm party to some of these discussions, that we can develop vaccines for certain cancers once we can get the genome figured out and we can start taking, getting immunizations for them to protect ourselves. So, it's hard to say that it would be gone completely, but our ability to manage and treat it is really going to suppress it. I recently participated in a study that was a cancer screening study through the Henry Ford Health System. It's a national study. There's a bunch of health systems. They screened me for 50 different cancers based on a blood test. And it's not FDA approved yet, but I came back clean. So that was good news. But the thing is that they could have found some things very, very early. And, pancreatic cancer is, it's a death sentence for the most part if you get that as a diagnosis. Well, it's a death sentence because they don't find it till it's stage 4. There's no symptoms. The screening I took screened for it. And if they would have found it, they could have treated me for it. My odds of survival would have been much greater. So there are things like that, in addition to any sort of biologicals that will prevent it, but our ways to identify and treat it are just going to grow. I mean, breast cancer is much less lethal than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago because of the focus on self-exam, focused on annual mammography, looking at the genetic testing to see if you carry the BRCA gene. There are so many things coming out that it's still lethal, but not nearly as bad as it was 20, 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And Kimberly, when we think about education, we just talked about IE, all right, artificial intelligence, and just 30 years of improved virtual reality. What kind of need will there be for bricks and mortar in education?
I think that's a big question. I think the placemaking still exists, like I said before. I think even if you look at the difference between, I work at a community college, between universities, the young people, there's a lot of value outside of the classroom in a college experience, and they still desire that. So, there's going to be, the University of Michigan and Michigan State, and then there are going to be schools in between like Eastern and Central that may have to downsize their footprint in regards to the number of buildings that they have. And that mostly is because of the students that we serve. At a community college, we serve students with a lot of life. And coming to a campus was not a priority for them. They need the knowledge, they need the classroom experience, and so I think the brick and mortars will still exist, but if students come to campus, the expectations are gonna be much greater, and it may be a lot smaller for many students, but I don't think it's gonna go away. It's gotta be purposeful. I see more labs. I see virtual reality labs where we may not have to go into a hospital to do clinical visits. We can do clinical visits on campus using virtual reality. They get to practice more. There's a lot to be said with simulation and virtual reality in a lot of fields where that level of practice is better than being in a clinical site because I may not get to get my hands dirty if I actually am sitting there waiting for something to happen. So I think the bricks and mortars will still exist. They'll just serve a different purpose, and it'll be a lot more meaningful in regards to, I think, those skills that students are practicing and learning when they're on campus.
Mm-hmm. Great. Brian, you talked a lot about a lot of great things, and you kind of pulled this whole thing together for us in terms of a futuristic view. What is the most dramatic thing that you see in 2052 as it relates to this business that you're in?
Well, we've already talked about artificial intelligence, and I think that artificial intelligence drives a lot of the technological adoption that hasn't yet happened in construction in the way it has with manufacturing, but that will enable it to happen over the next 30 years. The reason that we don't see as many robots on a job site as you would a factory is because there's so many variables, right? A job site, literally, if you're doing the job right, it changes every day. And that robot can't figure out the new position, squeeze into a tight space, but artificial intelligence allows, I hate to sound like I'm quoting Terminator, but allows the machines to learn and adapt and to adjust to a changing job site. And so it also allows you, with all that big data, you don't have to have 50 people crunching numbers. The artificial intelligence can presumably suss out some trends that will help you become more efficient and improve safety and health of your workforce. So artificial intelligence is kind of the, for lack of a better word, coding that enables a lot of that technology to actually be applicable on a job site in a way that it isn't today.
Mm-hmm. So when do we get to George Jetson and flying cars? And
I think we'll see robots on job sites before we see flying cars or self-driving cars. But maybe I'm just,
Yeah. Guys, we have 9 minutes. Anything that either one of you would like to just hit on before we close out?
I think the one thing I would add, as we talked about artificial intelligence, is when you think about younger students, elementary age students, and how that technology adapts to their learning. So, we learned to memorize the multiplication table. When you think about those things happening with an iPad or a computer or through an app, for students to be able at a very young age to actually learn those repetitious things where the computer is responding to where they're learning, I think that is something that changes the time that's spent by a teacher teaching them more higher order critical thinking skills. And I think it's just a matter of us figuring out how we apply technology and AI and VR and all those things, because that role of the teacher will still exist, but it's how we use technology to make that learning experience a lot richer. And so I think there's still so much to be gained in classrooms as it relates to students learning and being able to have a computer adapt to them and actually meet them where they're at as far as the learning needs.
Good, thank you so much.
Can I build off of that too? Carl at the very beginning said that we are slow to change when in the creative industries, and I will lump us all together right now for a point, architecture, construction, and engineering, because of the giant commodity, if you will, that we make. It's not just a phone, car, and so on. And start with an analogy of thinking, I think many of us in this room remembers that Amazon started as a bookstore, right? That was it. They sold books. And look at what happened. If we don't change the three of industries together, someone will fill that gap. And it won't be architects, engineers, or constructors. Someone will fill it. So we have to, and the way they did it, the way Google does this stuff is they invest in experimentation. They have side companies that are doing a sidewalk for all the ideas that we see come to life. Many have failed but they've invested into that. We, as three industries, come together. We could invest in ways to figure out how do we fill the gaps that are there, and someone else doesn't come behind us like an Amazon did with industries and become. We don't want other people to be prophetic. We can be. And this, I thank AARP for doing this, because this is the kind of step we need to take together to make that work.
Great.
I would have said 4 years ago, we were a lot more as an association worried about like technology companies coming in and disrupting the construction industry, right?
Right.
I mean, that was, it was like the last undisrupted industry, and they gave it a try. And in fact, Katera, if you remember the name, was essentially like they're just going to disrupt the model.
Exactly.
And it didn't really work out in the end for them, but I think that's more foreshadowing of things to come. But certainly, I think what gives me optimism is that there is actually it's not particularly high profile, but there's a relatively vibrant venture capital community in the construction industry, right, or in the ACE industry. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are funded through construction companies. They are investing in and driving in a lot of innovation in this industry. And we as an association are spending more time kind of follow the money, right? You got a lot of smart people. Not every investment, the nature of the business, not every investment they're going to make is going to work out. But they're obviously spending a lot of time figuring out what are those technologies or tools or software that are going to be more applicable in the industry. So I guess the point I would make is follow the money when it comes to what the future technologies are going to be or the disruptors are.
I think education and entertainment, though, have a really difficult line that you can go up against, but you can't cross. We can't have computers taking your tickets and not saying, hey, welcome to the movie, or thank you for coming. You depersonalize the experience. And I think teachers have the same sort of issues to work through, where you don't encourage children to learn without that personalization. So I think, in the back, yes, there's automated fryers these days that will cook your food, but in the front of the house, people want to have communal experiences. I believe in that. We wouldn't be investing in our business if we didn't believe in that. But I think you can't take away the personalization of those communal experiences, same as it is in education.
Great. Hey, guys, Anthony, Gabriel, Peter, Kim, Dan, and Brian, thank you so much for bringing us all this wonderful information. You're going to make us a bigger, a better, and a brighter industry with your words of wisdom and your futuristic views. So let's give them guys a big hand for what they've done.